Don't you just love waking up to a hot cup of coffee? Yeah, me too. But did you also know that the majority of coffee out there actually contain mold and mycotoxins? Yeah, I know. You do not want to be consuming these on a daily basis because it actually creates illness in the body. So I found this amazing company called Purity Coffee, where they will source sustainable coffee. It's always organic and it never contains any mold. So if you want to do something for yourself and your family, definitely try this coffee. It tastes divine, by the way. So head over to puritycoffee.com. That's PURITYCOFFEE.com and put in the code Margaret20 to get 20% off your order. And you'll thank me later. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. And you're listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. This week, we have a very special guest, Dr. Tom O'Brien, and we are talking all about his book. It's called You Can Fix Your Brain Just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. So in case you don't know Dr. Tom, he is someone that I have definitely looked up to. I have attended conferences where he has lectured. I have learned so much about being gluten-free and having an autoimmune condition than compared to anybody else. And so it's my honor to have him on the podcast this week. So just a little bit more about him. He is an internationally recognized, admired, compassionate speaker who focuses on food sensitivities, environmental toxins, and the development of autoimmune diseases. So today we talk about so much stuff, like amazing, brilliant, and so much wisdom from Dr. Tom today. And, when it comes to things like leaky gut, when you have that, you have to consider that you may also have leaky brain. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about the toxins that are affecting our brain. And you're not going to believe just how many things are affecting it. I mean, all the time. Then he talks about a couple of different studies. Like when he talks, there's just so many things that are just, he puts it in a way that's so easy to understand. And so he just talks about these studies with mothers and their children and when they've been exposed to toxins. There's just so much depth to this conversation. So without further ado, on to the show. We are back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and today's special guest is Dr. Tom O'Brien. Dr. Tom, I wanted to just mention something real quick before we get into the interview, is that I have gone to so many of your lectures talking about gluten and being gluten-free, and I've been gluten-free now for about 13 years. But I remember one specific thing that you mentioned, and I'll never forget it. And that is that even when some of us who need to be gluten-free take a bite or two of something and think that it's not a big deal, I remember you saying that it is a really big deal, that it takes months for your gut to heal, even just from that one bite. And so I'll never forget that you said that in one of your lectures.
Yes, that's very true. And wheat is the only food that I've been able to find the science on, that when we cross the line of tolerance and meaning that our immune system starts fighting wheat, and that's easily identified on the correct blood test. You can easily identify that. When we've crossed the line of tolerance, wheat is the only food where our immune system acts just like if we had gotten a vaccination. So I'd like to give
goodness.
I'd
Wow.
like to give you the example of a vaccination and what the purposes are for vaccinations historically. So when you get a vaccination for measles, as an example, they give you a shot of the bug, measles. And its purpose is to stimulate the immune system to recognize we've got a foreign invader here. We need to fight this.
Right.
And then your immune system starts making antibodies to measles. So the brain says, whoa, what is this in the bloodstream? This isn't supposed to be here. Yo, general. And you've got Army, Air Force, Marine Corps generals in the immune system sitting around with nothing to do. General, you now are General Measles. And General Measles builds an assembly line. The purpose of the assembly line is to start producing soldiers specifically trained to go after measles. They're called antibodies. And they won't attack other bacteria. They won't attack viruses. They attack measles. So they're going through the bloodstream looking for measles.
Right.
And remember, your bloodstream's just a highway. I mean, all the traffic's going in the same direction, but there's no lanes of traffic. Everything's bouncing into each other like bumper cars. So how do these antibodies, these special forces, identify the measles bugs from the vaccination that are now in your bloodstream? And they're looking for a protein coating on measles. I call it an orange vest. So they're going through the bloodstream looking for orange vests. Anywhere they see orange vests, they fire their high-powered rifles, because these guys are special forces, and they destroy that measles bug that you were given in the vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good thing. And General Measles is watching all this, and when all of the measles bugs have been destroyed that were in the vaccination, and there's no new insults of measles coming in, eventually General Measles says, okay, turn off the assembly line. We don't need any more special forces for measles out there in the bloodstream right now. And if you were to get a blood test looking for antibodies to measles, you are unlikely to have any antibodies in your bloodstream right now, unless you've been exposed, but most people haven't. And so, but General Measles is vigilant the rest of his life, so that if you're ever exposed to measles again, you're on an airplane and the guy behind you has just come from Mozambique and he coughs into the air and you inhale measles. If you're ever exposed again, General Measles is vigilant the rest of his life. And he sees, oh, measles is here. He just has to flip the switch to turn on the assembly line and build more soldiers. You don't have to build the assembly line again. And that's why with vaccinations, it takes a few months until you've got adequate amounts of antibodies in your bloodstream, because you're building the assembly line to make special forces. But
Right.
later, for example, if you're going to Africa, you need vaccinations for dengue fever and yellow fever and all these weird diseases months and months before you go. But if you go back 10 years later, 15 years later, you just need a booster shot. Everybody knows about booster shots. You just need a booster shot 2 weeks before you go, because you just have to wake up general dengue fever, general yellow fever, and the antibodies in your bloodstream in a couple of days, as opposed to initially it took months to get the antibody load up because you have to build the assembly line. I give you all of that background because wheat is the only food. General Measles is called a memory B cell. There's a memory, and General Measles never goes away. They last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, depending on the vaccination. Wheat is the only food that produces memory B cells when you've crossed the line of tolerance. If your immune system is making elevated antibodies to any of the components of wheat, you've crossed the line of tolerance, and your immune system is allocating its very precious energy to fight wheat, as opposed to fighting everything else that we're exposed to right now. So if you Google eggs and memory B cells, there's no studies. Soy and memory B cells, there's no studies. But wheat and memory B cells, here come the studies.
Right.
That's why if you're ever exposed, even the tiniest little bit, and we now know the amount of exposure it takes to activate your immune system, and this was jaw-dropping to me, is nanograms. A nanogram is a billionth of a gram. So the chef that stirs the pasta in the restaurant and then takes the wooden spoon and goes over to the pot of gluten-free pasta and stirs the pasta using the same spoon. That's all it takes. That's all it takes to contaminate the gluten-free pasta. And so minor amounts, nanogram amounts of exposure, once you've crossed the line of tolerance, will activate your immune system. And when General Gluten flips the switch, turns on the assembly line, you start producing soldiers immediately. But General Gluten is watching all of this, and usually the assembly line will stay on for 4 weeks, 6 weeks to make sure that we've cleared everything out of there. And then the antibodies that are produced towards the end of that 4, 5, 6 week period, they have a lifespan of 6 weeks to 2 months. So with a single exposure, you're looking at 3 to 6 months of elevated antibodies in your bloodstream to gluten from a single exposure.
Yes, that's what I remember you mentioning way back in a conference. And I have patients who I help women with autoimmune conditions. And so I have women so I have some who are very good at being gluten-free. And then I have some that are like, well, I went, Sunday pasta at my mom's house and I ate it, just one meal, I only maybe once a week. But it's still, all it's doing is triggering inflammation week after week after week.
That inflammation will continue for a minimum of 2, 3, 4 months from a single exposure. That's your immune system trying to protect you from something that it's recognized as a threat.
Right. Definitely.
And, the lucky people, the really lucky ones are the ones that get gut problems when they're exposed because they can't argue with how they feel. They may choose to ignore it. That's up to them, but they can't argue with it. The unlucky ones are those that don't get gut symptoms. They get thyroid symptoms, or they get brain symptoms, or they get skin symptoms. And the antibodies to their thyroid or the antibodies to their brain go up, or the antibodies to their skin. And 3, 4, 5 days, a week later, now their psoriasis is flared up again. And they never associate with that Sunday pasta 5 days ago, a week ago, that triggered the psoriasis to come back. They don't associate. So the lucky ones are the ones with gut symptoms. And the ratio, unfortunately, is 8 to 1. For every one person with gut symptoms with a problem with wheat, there are 8 that do not have gut symptoms. They've got thyroid symptoms or brain symptoms or joint symptoms or skin symptoms or depression or anxiety. And that's how it manifests for them. So it's very difficult to associate the symptom flare-up that they're having with something they ate a few days ago.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it does take some time for some people for it to show up. And so you wrote this amazing book called You Can Fix Your Brain. And tell us why you wrote this book. I know you're super, you've spoken about gluten for a really long time. What had you make this connection?
Yes, thank you. My first book called The Autoimmune Fix, and it won a National Book Award, which not many health books do.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. And that book really sets the stage to understand how inflammation and disease occurs in our bodies. And it's in everyday language, so people really get it. It drops their jaw, but they get it. The next book, I said, you know what? I've got to expand on this concept in a way that people can relate to. And so I picked the brain. I easily could have written with almost all the same data if I'd said, you can fix your liver, or you can fix your heart, or you can fix your skin. I mean, almost the same mechanisms and same triggers are in place. But I picked the brain because the brain is the canary in the coal mine.
Mm.
And what I mean by that, in the 1800s, coal miners going down into the mines would bring a canary in a bird cage down into the mines with them. And they'd listen to the canary sing its song. And if it stopped singing at some point, they go over and take a look. If the canary's fallen over in the bottom of the cage, they blow their whistle and everybody gets out of there real quick. Mm-hmm. Because a canary is much more sensitive to methane and carbon monoxide, which humans really can't smell very easily. And one of the dangers of coal mining was that you breathe these gases that leak from underground. It'll kill you quickly. Mm-hmm. So the canary in the coal mine means here's an early warning system of you got a big threat here, a big problem. And the brain is the canary in the coal mine in our bodies that most of us, we take it for granted and we joke about it because we've just accepted, oh man, I'm getting older. I just don't remember the way I used to. I mean, sometimes I go out to the parking lot in the shopping center and I forget what lane my car is in, or where did I put my keys? I'm just getting older. I'm getting old quickly and really too young. Well, really, how old are you? Well, I'm 38. No, that's not supposed to happen. That means that your brain is not functioning properly.
Right.
But we've categorized that as being, oh, I'm getting older. I just don't remember the way I used to. That is not accurate physiology. It means something's out of balance. Something's not working right. And it scares us. It just terrifies us. And so we ignore it and we joke about it and we kind of write it off as, oh, I'm getting older, I guess. Ha ha. No. As an example, Blue Cross Blue Shield, arguably the largest health insurance for-profit company in the English language, in the English world, published in February of last year this little booklet and said, we got a problem here. And and they went back and they looked at their records. In the years 2013 to 2017, so in that 4-year period, there was a 407% increase in the diagnosis of early dementia in 30 to 45-year-olds. 30 to 45-year-olds.
That's incredible.
407% increase. That people are, the brain's the canary in the coal mine. And people are not recognizing that their brains aren't working the way they're supposed to, or they do, and they write it off because it terrifies them and don't want to think about it. So, I'm too stressed. I'm just stressed. I have to cut down my stress. And then they live the lives anyway, the way they do. Or, oh, I'm getting older. I'm just getting, haha. No, that's not supposed to happen. And by the time you get, you're recognized as having dementia, you're pretty far down the trail of brain deterioration. Yeah. It means that too many brain cells have been killed off and the connections aren't working very well anymore. And in 2019, Health and Human Services had an advisory council that met for months and months. They brought in world experts on this increase in the incidence of Alzheimer's and what are we going to do. And they put together a beautiful graph that shows, first, you have normal levels of brain function. Then you start getting some subtle brain dysfunction because of inflammation in your body. That the inflammation is killing off brain cells. You can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't identify it, but you're killing off brain cells because of the excess amount of inflammation. Mm-hmm. And when you kill off brain cells, you make antibodies to your brain to get rid of the old and damaged cells. And as you have more inflammation for whatever the trigger is, maybe you eat tuna multiple times a week and you've got mercury toxicity that's accumulating in your brain, causing the inflammation, that killing off brain cells. And so now you're making antibodies to get rid of the old and damaged brain cells, which is a really good thing. But because the trigger for the inflammation, the gasoline on the fire, if you will, you keep pouring gasoline on the fire, you keep eating tuna, or you keep living in a moldy house or breathing mold, or you keep eating gluten if you've crossed the line of tolerance for gluten, whatever the trigger is, but you keep doing it, you're throwing gasoline on the fire, so you're causing more inflammation, which kills off more brain cells, so you make more antibodies to those old and damaged brain cells to get rid of them, and that increased antibody level has a life of its own. It becomes self-perpetuating. Now you're killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. And the Health and Human Services Advisory Council showed this goes on for over 20 years of killing off brain cells, and you don't have any recognizable symptoms. But this is going on for over 20 years. Then you get mild cognitive impairment. That's not diagnosed as Alzheimer's yet. And they show that it's the same process, but you have less brain cells. So now you're making jokes. Oh, I'm not remembering the way I used to, or you're reducing your sense of smell. You're starting to lose your sense of smell, and you don't. Oh, this food doesn't it doesn't smell the same anymore. And that goes on for 7 years on average. So that's 27 years of inflammation in your brain, killing off brain cells that we're not recognizing and we're doing nothing about. And our lifestyle habits are what are fueling that inflammation, whatever the habit is, which is what the book's about. What are the habits that you have to explore to see, are they contributing to the inflammation? But that goes on for at least 27 years. Wow. Then you get a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, as if the problem just began. And that's where Blue Cross Blue Shield said 407% increase in mild cognitive impairment in the last 4 years in 30 to 45-year-olds. But this mechanism, Margaret, has been going on for decades. And so we don't recognize it.
What is actually what are some of the things that are causing this huge decline?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll give you an example. A 2016 study that was published in Chicago, 308th month of pregnancy, they collected their urine and they measured how many phthalates did they have in their urine and what level of phthalates. Phthalates are chemicals used to mold plastic. And the most common one that people have heard of is BPA, bisphenol A. And so that's common, but there are many phthalates. And they measured 5 phthalates, including BPA, the top 5 phthalates. They categorized the results into fourths: the lowest quartile of BPA in the urine, the next quartile, the third quartile, and the highest quartile of phthalates in urine. They then monitored these offspring, these children, for 7 years. When the children turned 7 years old, so these researchers waited 7 years. They had all this data, but they waited for 7 years. Why 7? Well, that's a whole nother discussion. And for Sacred Medicine, perhaps we'll do that sometime. You'll ask me, what's the 7-year itch?
Right.
And we'll talk about what 7 years is physiologically. But they waited 7 years. Then they did Wechsler IQ tests on all of these children, the official IQ test. What they found, now there's not much in medicine that's all or every, but this was every child whose mother was in the highest quartile of phthalates in urine in pregnancy 7 years ago, compared to the children whose mothers were in the lowest quartile. Every child in the highest quartile, their IQ was 7 points lower than the children in the lowest quartile of phthalates in mom's urine in pregnancy. Now, 7
Wow.
points doesn't mean anything to anybody until you understand a 1 point difference is noticeable. A 7 point difference is a difference between a child working really hard, getting straight A's in school, and a child working really hard, getting straight C's in school.
Mm-hmm.
This child doesn't have a chance in hell of ever excelling because their brain never developed properly. Now go to Google, that great library in the sky, and type in phthalates and neurogenesis, nerve growth. And here come the studies that show that these plasticizers, these phthalates, inhibit nerve growth. So when you ask, what are the toxins and how do they affect us? That's one example. And in the last few years, many people have been hearing about microplastics that are in our food and in our fish and in our shellfish. Well, those are phthalates. That's like having these phthalates are increasing in concentration in your liver, in your kidneys, in your bladder, in your brain. And you start looking at these studies and it just drops your jaw. How we as a society have just fallen prey to the comforts of modern society, not looking at the complications of the human body being exposed to flame retardant chemicals. How many children have you ever heard of whose lives were saved in a fire because they were wearing sleeping gear soaked in flame retardant chemicals?
Right.
None.
Exactly.
Or your sheets or your blankets. And you wash a sheet 30 times, it still outgasses minute amounts of these flame retardant chemicals into the air, and you're breathing it for hours every night. The nightstand next to your bed, if it's not solid wood, it's compressed wood, and that is soaked in formaldehyde, which outgasses into the air minute amounts. The reason that we're exposed to all this, that our government allows this to happen, is the Toxic Substance Control Act of 1976, which is still the regulating guidelines for introduction of chemicals into our environment. The chemical industry has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to make sure nobody touches that law. Why? Because they paid off the senators and the representatives back then, because this legislation that regulates how chemicals can be introduced into our environment has no teeth. You have to prove the chemicals you're exposed to in the amounts that you're exposed to are toxic to you. And they're not. The amount of phthalates you're exposed to when you store food in plastic storage containers overnight in the refrigerator, and the next day your chicken has got phthalates in it, that amount of phthalates is not toxic to humans. There's no evidence that it's toxic. And that's what the Toxic Substance Control Act did, was that you have to prove that that amount is toxic. And it's not. And at the time, many, many consumer groups were arguing, you can't do this. This doesn't work. It's the accumulation of this stuff over years and years that's the problem. But they got it passed. They paid them off and they got it passed. And it's still the regulating guidelines. I just saw a study the other day that blew me away. Pregnant women, if they eat, they compared pregnant women eating organic and pregnant women who are eating regular conventional fruits and vegetables. And if pregnant women are eating 2.3 servings, that was the average, 2.3 servings or more a day of conventional vegetables, meaning they're sprayed, and they may be GMO, that their chances of a live pregnancy reduce by 27% compared to the women who are eating organic. This just came out.
That's huge.
Huge. 2.3 servings a day. And we're all telling our patients, eat fruits and vegetables, do the rainbow diet, all the polyphenols are great for you. And all of that's true. but our food is being poisoned. And we don't know it because you can't taste it, you can't see it, and you can't prove that that amount of insecticide is toxic to humans. It's not. But mom's been eating conventional fruits and vegetables for 25, 30 years. And now in pregnancy, 2.3 servings a day or more reduces her likelihood of a live pregnancy by 27%.
That's incredible. That really is.
I know. So I'm
scary.
sorry. I'm sorry to be, the harbinger of this news. But what it means is that you can't mess around with this. You need to do the deep dive. Every single person needs to do their own deep dive and look at reframing how they interact with their world. You want sacred medicine? Your body is sacred. Your body is sacred. Mm-hmm. It's designed to live on planet Earth with the food that grows on planet Earth, not the food that has been genetically modified and they pour chemicals, insecticides on it, but the plant can handle the insecticides and pesticides. It won't kill the plant because it's been genetically modified, but it kills the bugs, so the plants grow. And now you've got a plant that's loaded with these insecticides and pesticides. Right. That's not sacred.
No.
That's blasphemy. And excuse me for being so intense about it, but we've got a 10-month-old now, and we're doing everything we can to make him to create an environment so he can flourish, and he does flourish, and we're so grateful. Every day we're grateful, so grateful. But there's a whole world that young people have to learn about how to protect their bodies. Nail polish. There's no evidence that the amount of phthalates that leach into the bloodstream from nail polish in 3 to 5 minutes is toxic to humans. That's how they get away with this. But when you learn this, then you just have to do your due diligence to find a company whose nail polish is phthalate free. And it's not hard. I've got 3 URLs in the book. You can fix your brain for that. There's 3 URLs for glass storage containers. Miles Kimball, Amazon, and I don't remember what the third one is, but you just have to do diligence. That's why the subtitle of that book, You Can Fix Your Brain, the subtitle is just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. And why? Because you're overwhelmed with what I'm telling you. Everyone gets overwhelmed. I know that, but you can't run away from it. But you allocate 1 hour a week. You talk to your family, say, look, every Tuesday night after dinner, I'm going to spend an hour to learn a little more about how to keep us healthy. Or every Sunday after services, whenever it is, but every week, you allocate 1 hour. And you go back to the book and you look to the URL for glass storage containers. And then you go online to Miles Kimball. You say, oh, those look pretty good. And then you go to, oh, I really like those. And you order 3 round ones and 2 square ones and 1 for the pie, and you pay with your credit card, you hit send. It took you an hour. You're done for the week. But next week, your diligence is now you go for nail polish. Next week, now you go for phthalate-free blinds on your windows instead of plastic blinds because the plastic outgasses phthalates into the air. Next week, you go into what foods are safer. Well, I can't afford organic. So then you go to the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, and you download their handout on the Dirty Dozen. These are the fruits and vegetables that are the very worst. And then you download the Clean 15. These are the fruits and vegetables, if you have to buy conventional and not organic, that are the cleanest available. And you just have to do your diligence to learn about this. This has to become a priority. And I don't know how to get the message across except to say, wake up. Wake up. There's a 407% increase in mild cognitive impairment in 30 to 45-year-olds in the last 4 years. Wake up.
Insane.
That's what's happening in our world right now, Margaret.
There's just toxins everywhere.
That's
right.
It really
is.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. And I mean, not only changing, your laundry detergent and, getting rid of like fabric softeners and things like that. But there's also, in the air,
Exactly. when you read the book on the fabric softener, we gave you the URL to go. This guy makes the cleanest detergents and Windex and wood polish furniture and the cleanest stuff, the chemical-free detergents and stuff. And so it just takes time to learn about this and to order, to try it, and for the air. When you read about the air, you get an air filtration system in your house. You budget for it, and so that your kids have clean air in their bedrooms. Because when you see the studies about brain function and living in the city and the air, and that indoor air pollution is much worse than outdoor air pollution because all of the furnishings in the house, then you start. And here's one, and this one you can get right away if you go to my website, thedr.com/plant. And you go to the website and you download the article from NASA that says 2 6-inch houseplants in a room absorb 73% of the toxins in the air.
I love it.
2 6-inch plants. So you buy a bunch of 6-inch plants for every room in your house. And you say, well, I don't have a green thumb. They'll die in a couple of months. Then you buy more. But they absorb the toxins so that your baby and your family is not absorbing the toxins. And you just have to learn these type of things.
Yes. So I just wanted to switch gears a little bit and just talk more about the brain and, that the concept of leaky gut, leaky brain. And if you can just kind of tell us more a little bit about that.
Sure, you bet. I'll start with the gut. That our gastroenterologists thought until, even in the 1990s, there were still gastroenterologists saying this, that the gut was a sealed membrane, that you swallow something and it stays in the tube, that it doesn't get in your body. And say, well, but that doesn't make any sense. How do you get the proteins and the carbohydrates and the fats out of your food? There has to be some kind of absorption mechanism.
Right.
And then the technology came out so we could see more clearly that your cells open and close. It's like the Panama Canal. The gates open, the boat goes in, the gates close. Then your immune system checks, what is this? And then the next gates open, the food goes down a little further between the cells, the gate closes, the immune system checks it out. So it's a series of gates that open and close between the cells. And interestingly, the control of the gates completely controlled by vitamin D, which is why we have to make sure we all have optimum levels of vitamin D and not just okay levels. So the gates open and close. That's how we absorb our foods. The same concept occurs around the brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. The gates open and close. And it's the same proteins that open and close the gates. They're called the zonulin family of proteins. And so when you have a problem with zonulin, when you have elevated antibodies killing off zonulin, which is a mechanism by which leaky gut occurs, it doesn't occur just in the gut. It occurs wherever zonulin is. And zonulin is in the gut, it's in the lungs, it's in the brain, the blood-brain barrier. So when you have a leaky gut, by definition, you've got a leaky brain. That's why it was Michael Gershon at Princeton in 1999 that wrote the book, The Second Brain. And he told us way back then, for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. The ratio is 9-1. And the vast majority of those messages come from the good guys in your gut, called your microbiome. That the bacteria in your gut, and there's hundreds of families of good bacteria in your gut if you have a healthy gut. The good bacteria in your gut, they create exhaust. Just like when you exercise, if you exercise too hard, the next day your muscles are sore, and we know that's lactic acid. Lactic acid is the exhaust of your muscle cells. Well, your bacterial cells in the gut, when they're fed proper food, they make exhaust also. It's called metabolites. And those metabolites go into the bloodstream from the gut. And 36% of all of the small molecules in the bloodstream at any one time, in the human bloodstream, more than a third of everything in your bloodstream are the metabolites of the bacteria in your gut, meaning the messengers of the bacteria in your gut. So the bacteria in your gut, using the example of the brain, has its hands on the steering wheel, determining how your brain's functioning. And how that works is it determines the amount of brain hormones you have, called neurotransmitters. The ratio of all those neurotransmitters is what determines, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you depressed? Do you have anxiety? Do you have bipolar? It's the imbalance of the neurotransmitters, your brain hormones, that sets you up for those kinds of conditions. And the ratio of those brain hormones, neurotransmitters, the balance of all that is controlled by the balance of your gut bacteria, the microbiome. So if you have a bad microbiome, it's called dysbiosis, you're sending messages of inflammation into your brain. Here comes depression, or here comes a vulnerability to anxiety. It just depends. And so everyone that wants a healthier functioning brain, you must include in your protocols building a healthy, diverse microbiome in your gut.
I love it. That's so true. And so when people talk about being on antidepressants, then it's not really doing anything for the gut. It's what I would call, considered a Band-Aid. Would you say that the majority of people out there who have anxiety or depression largely have gut issues?
100%.
Okay.
Professor Michael Mays is a pretty famous psychiatrist, and he began publishing in the 1990s about major depressive disorder and the gut microbiome. Every patient that he sees, every depressive patient, every anxiety patient, he does a battery of tests on them to see, are they inflamed? And every single one of them are inflamed. And so he started talking about the inflammation of the brain back in the 1990s. And then he realized, well, wait a minute, those people that change their diet, they get better. I wonder what that's about. And then he realized that it's the microbiome that has its hands on the steering wheel of where your brain's going, how it functions, meaning the balance of your brain hormones called neurotransmitters. And he's published many papers on this. Michael Mays, M-A-E-S. And you start reading about this, wow, this just makes sense. And you start seeing when they put him on what Dr. Mays calls the leaky gut diet, which is gluten-free, dairy-free, added sugar-free, lots of fruits and vegetables, they get better. And he monitors, he does blood tests every once in a while, see the inflammation's coming down, the inflammation's coming down, the inflammation's coming down. And if it's not coming down, he changes their diet and looks to see what is it. And that's what my book is all about. You can fix your brain, because it can be foods, it can be chemicals that you put on your body. Cosmetics is very common, causing inflammation in your body. It can be the air you're breathing in your house. It can be mold. It can be bacteria. You may have a lingering infection in your body that's not making you so sick that you can't work, but it's causing inflammation throughout your body. There are so many things that might cause it. The key to success is 1 hour a week, because there's so much to learn. But you just tackle it 1 week at a time, and in 6 months, you got this.
Right.
You dialed this down. That's the only way I know of to be successful in changing the direction of your health long term.
That's true, because if you're going to change everything in 1 week, it's too much. It's too overwhelming. And so I think that's great. Just to pick one thing, do it every week, change one thing.
Right. Learn one more thing that is the gasoline on the fire for your inflammation. One more thing. Keep looking, keep investigating, keep asking questions, keep doing tests. The rule is test, don't guess. And there's a blood test now for your brain that is tremendous. It's called the NeuroZoomer Plus. And the technology of this test, Mayo Clinic calls it a new era in laboratory medicine, that the technology is cutting edge, very accurate, very comprehensive to identify, is your brain on fire? Is it inflamed right now? Because if it is inflamed, you're killing off brain cells right now. And you just don't know it because you can't feel it when it's happening. But when you do this very accurate test, when you do it and you say, oh my God, I didn't know this, then you start asking the question, where is the gasoline coming from? What do I have to eliminate in my life? What gasoline, what triggers for inflammation do I have to eliminate? Well, I don't know, but how do I find out? Oh, okay, I have to, okay, plastic storage containers. Okay, phthalates and nail polish. Okay, organic cosmetic. Okay, and you just start learning.
Right.
That's the only way I know. Only way I know to be successful at this. And you look back in 6 months and you say, yes, got it. Nailed it down for my family, especially if you've got kids. We went to the pediatrician for his 10-month visit. And the pediatrician, again, this is the 4th visit. He's blown away again because our son is in the middle of the scale for 2-year-olds. And he's 10 months old. And he said his nervous system, his balance, his dexterity, his efforts at communicating and his size, my gosh, what are you feeding him? and I said abundanza, and I just did a mimic of holding up big breasts. And my wife does not have large breasts, but my wife prepared for pregnancy. We prepared for pregnancy for 3 years beforehand. And perhaps we'll do another interview in the future on how do you prepare for pregnancy, because that's the book I'm writing right now, that you have to get all these toxins out of your body beforehand. As the example I gave you of phthalates in urine in pregnancy and kids' IQ at 7 years old. You have these moms who are 25, 30 years old right now, they don't know that their body's been accumulating all these chemicals. They just don't know because they're fine. I'm okay. I'm pretty healthy. I feel good. And so they think they're okay. But look at what Blue Cross Blue Shield just told us of 30 to 45-year-olds, 407% increase in mild cognitive impairment because the inflammation that the Health and Human Services study tells us goes on for 25 to 30 years before you get a diagnosis. The inflammation's been going on for decades for these people. So it really, and I know this is overwhelming, but it really is. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, leads to that.
Right.
And you come in with that and you say, what do I take to get rid of that? You can't. Certainly there's things to take to help you feel better in the short term. And as you said, it's a Band-Aid on an oozing wound. But it helps. Temporarily it helps. But you've got to go back and look at what has my body accumulated?
Decades.
For decades. How am I exposing myself to what my body thinks is inflammatory? Doesn't matter if it's the healthiest food in the world, like some people think wheat is. It's not, but some people think that. Doesn't matter. If your immune system is fighting wheat and you just have to do an accurate test, and the test is called the wheat zoomer because you zoom in on the problem, just like the technology for the brain, the NeuroZoomer Plus, it's the same technology that Mayo Clinic says is unbelievable. That's what you have to look at is accurate tests to see where do I stand right now on this scale of sensitivity to wheat or to brain inflammation. Right.
And why don't you share, I would love to know your thoughts about fast foods because I preach this all the time on Instagram. And so I'd love to know what are your thoughts about fast foods?
Oh, that's really an easy question to answer. Just buy a Big Mac, take it out of the wrapper and leave it on the shelf. And then just buy a loaf of whole wheat bread, take a slice out of the wrapper, put it next to the Big Mac on the shelf. Wait 2 weeks and see what happens. The Big Mac looks perfect. Nothing's changed. The slice of whole wheat bread has lots of growth on it. There's bugs, bacteria. Things are living. Things are feeding off of the food. But a Big Mac, fast foods. Oh, there was another study that came out. Oh, come on. Can I remember this one? No, I can't. I can't remember what the complications were, but it dropped my jaw. It was about potato chips. And I said, oh, come on, really? Because that's my one vice. When I travel, I do about 150,000 miles a year travel,
Hmm. Wow.
lecturing all over the world. And when I'm in an airport, there's nothing to eat in
There's
airports
nothing
usually,
there. Hmm.
except conventional vegetables for salads, which I might fall prey to once in a while. But everything else is wheat based and garbage food. So I'll eat potato chips. I'll have a bag of potato chips to hold me over if I don't have any bars with me or something like that. So I saw
Right.
this study on potato chips. Oh, come on. So for the last 6 weeks, I'm not eating chips anymore. And but I can't remember what the complication was. Interesting block I've got on that
Yeah.
one.
I mean, I'm sure it has to do with maybe the palm oil, or if it's made with corn and
Sure, sure.
GMO corn or
So,
something.
so to your question, people go for fast foods for two reasons, I think. One, they're convenient, and two, the PhD chemists who designed that food know exactly what to include in that food to stimulate your addictive taste buds.
Yes. Hmm.
And so we, like Starbucks, we're addicted to Starbucks. We're not addicted to coffee. People who drink coffee, they don't have a hard time at all, giving it up if they want to for a period of time. Sometimes they'll have a headache for a day or so. People addicted to Starbucks, very different. They're raging. They like can't function because they're addicted to their double mocha, whatever latte. And it's because Starbucks, all of the chemicals they add to that beverage are designed to stimulate taste buds and the opiate receptors for addiction.
Amazing. I didn't realize that about Starbucks. Personally, I don't drink coffee, but I didn't realize that about Starbucks, that it was also with all of the chemicals I mean, do you mean like specific chemicals like made in a lab that are added to Starbucks, or do you mean like
Oh
just the
yes,
sugar?
yes. No, no, no. When they pump one or two pumps of whatever the sweetener and flavoring is that they're putting in
Right.
there, that hundreds of hours have gone in to determine now what ratio of chemicals should we add to this
That's
cocoa
incredible.
flavor. And
That's
and
incredible.
these are PhD food scientists that come up with all of this.
Amazing. It's horrifying.
It is, and we have to wake up to all of this because it's just killing us. The incidence of autism is going through the roof. The incidence of cognitive decline in our young people is going through the roof. The incidence of failure for live births is going through the roof. And
Mm.
it's just horrible what's happening. And most of our doctors don't have time to read these studies or haven't spent out of 126 medical schools, when they were screened to look at their coursework in nutrition, only 21% of them had one course in nutrition. The rest of them had none. One
Wow.
course. Yeah.
I mean, it's no
It's
wonder.
unbelievable. Yeah.
It's
They're
no wonder
just,
that my patients have their rheumatologist or primaries, and when I would mention something about food or gluten, and then they will say they never said a word. They never told me anything about what to eat or not to eat or avoid, or
I used
it's
to say it's not their fault. It's not the fault of that rheumatologist because they're not trained in school. They have absolutely no training on it. They've got no reality. They're trained to go for symptom relief and how to calm down the current symptoms. And that's their training. So I used to say it's not their fault, but I don't say that anymore because every single one of them has heard that diet nutrition has some kind of an impact, and they just don't want to take the time to learn.
that's true.
And so, excuse me, but it's shame on them. Shame
Right.
on them. I can't, I don't know. I've never kept track of how many rheumatoid patients we've been able to stabilize and phase them off their medication with the guidance of their rheumatologist. We always say, please go back to your rheumatologist and tell them, hey, I'm going to work with this doctor that does diet and nutrition, and I'm going to change my eating style a little bit, change some lifestyle habits. Can you monitor me and see if we can wean down on this medication over time in a way that you feel safe? I don't want to be crazy about this, so I'd like you to monitor me. And maybe over the course of 3 months or 6 months, we can reduce this medication. And every rheumatologist should be open to say, well, I don't know this is going to work, but yeah, as long as you're coming in every month or every couple of months, we'll check on you. Sure. Okay, good. I'd like to see how it goes for you. If they can say that, that's a great physician. That's someone that's acknowledging, I really don't know anything about that, but yeah, I just want to make sure you're safe. Let's see what happens. Sure. But unfortunately, most of them say, "Well, that's nonsense." You've got gastroenterologists who say food has nothing to do with your irritable bowel syndrome. Well, wait a minute. My bowels are irritated. I'm suffering. They're irritated. You called it irritable bowel syndrome, which is a nonsense diagnosis anyway.
I know.
All it's saying is that your bowels are irritated.
Right.
And you're telling me that what I put down there has nothing to do with them being irritated? Come on. I mean,
I know. It bothers me too. It bothers me so much. Every day I hear this from my patients.
It's unfortunate. And unfortunately, our patients have to get to a point of frustration and sometimes despair and then anger to say, you know what? I need to take this into my own hands. I need to learn more. And that's what I'm suggesting, 1 hour a week. And you do 2 hours if you want, but just be patient and kind with yourself. Don't think you're going to learn it all in a day. It's so overwhelming that you'll start buying. I mean, when you buy gifts for your friends with their newborn babies, you buy them organic cotton clothing. And it looks nice and all that. And you can smile knowing that it's safe for that baby. You don't buy them this polyester crap that's soaked in flame retardant chemicals because it's poisoning that baby. Excuse me, but it is. Just read the science.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's accumulative in their bodies. And then you wonder, how come my child keeps having these ear infections? And I have to give them antibiotics again and again. And our pediatrician said last week, he said, so your son, has he been sick? No. No sick? No sick. No sick. Well, he did have a fever of 100.5 for 1 day. Oh, okay. Is that he calmed down? That at least the kid's human. He's normal, right?
And also all BPA free everything for adults, but especially for kids.
Oh, critical. Silicone is a safe alternative for kids' drinking cups, kids' water bottles, kids' baby bottles. You give them plastic baby bottles, that plastic nipple. Just read the science on that and how much of those phthalates are getting into baby. It's really terrible. And, shame on all these companies, these multinational companies that are making billions in sales, just giving the same old plastic that we now know accumulates in our children's body and affects their brain growth and development. Shame on them for doing this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's just really, it's disheartening to see.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Tom, thank you so much. Where can people find you? This has been such an amazing interview.
Oh, thank you. Our website is thedoctor.com, thedr.com. Don't spell the word doctor out, just thedr.com. And for the one handout I mentioned, thedr.com/plant. And you'll get the NASA article on plants and learn which ones absorb toxins inside your home. But we have many handouts, many videos, many handouts. Help yourself. Go. And if I can say one more thing.
Yes, please.
My wife and I traveled the world. We went to 7 different countries. And I interviewed the world leaders in immunology and healthcare. Professor Yehuda Schoenfeld, Tel Aviv, Israel, 28 at the time, 28 of the PhD students who received their PhD from him at Tel Aviv University, 28 are now chairmen of the departments of immunology at hospitals and med schools around the world. They're his students. And this is the godfather of autoimmunity. And we interviewed him about vaccines and the impact on children. Michael Marsh, the godfather of celiac disease. Mark Houston, the chairman of the Hypertension Institute, the High Blood Pressure Institute at Vanderbilt University. we interviewed people all over the world, the scientists. And I knew what questions to ask them because to make it of interest to the general person, because I read their studies. And so I went right to the heart of it. I didn't say, so why are you interested in this? Tell us about that. I went right to the heart of it. And then I interviewed the doctors who were integrative doctors, functional medicine doctors, holistic doctors, who were following the guidelines of these world-class scientists. And then I asked those doctors to invite 3 or 4 patients to come in for an interview who were following their recommendations. And these people who were compliant with the doctor's recommendations, reversing their MS, reversing their rheumatoid, reversing their chronic fatigue, reversing their multiple chemical sensitivity, reversing their Hashimoto's, time and time and time again. 85 people we interviewed, and we put the docuseries together. It's called Betrayal, the autoimmune disease solution they're not telling you. And I'll never forget, this 44-year-old woman in London, she came in and she said, I took the tube, that's the underground train. I took the tube to come here today, and I walked the 7 blocks from the tube station to here. And she said, it's not a big deal. And then she got teary-eyed and said, but it is. And then we show you the pictures that she gave us of her in a wheelchair 2 years earlier. She can't walk. And her MRIs with 7 lesions in her brain. She has MS. And then here she is today, no symptoms whatsoever. And her current MRIs, 2 lesions left on the brain. 5 of them are already gone, and she has no symptoms. And she's just smiling and happy and so grateful. And we show you this again and again and again. And it's all free. It's called Betrayal. If you go to thedoctor.com/betrayal, it's right there to watch. And we've had we've had over 600,000 people watch it.
Amazing.
And you see this and you say, wow, well, that just makes sense. And it empowers you to this concept of 1 hour a week to just start learning. And in 6 months, because these people say, because we asked them all, how long did it take you? Well, I started feeling better in a few weeks, but it really took about 1.5 years to get rid of my rheumatoid arthritis. You hear it again and again and again. And then you understand how to set a big picture with realistic goals and what you have to do to get there. So it's called Betrayal, the dr.com/betrayal.
Oh, I must watch it. I will definitely watch that. Thank you so much for that.
Yes.
So this has been really an awesome information. I mean, the wisdom that you put out every single time I've seen you on stage, at every conference that I've attended where you have spoken. So I'm so delighted that you said yes to being on the podcast today. So thank you so much. And definitely people will take your words to heart and start changing their lives, start decreasing the number of toxins that they are surrounded by in their everyday life. So thank you so much, Dr. Tom.
Margaret, thank you. This concept of sacred medicine, sacred is not always quiet chanting Om in the background. I mean, sometimes sacred is boots on the ground, take care of yourself and your family. And this is sacred medicine.
Thank you so much. How is that interview? Isn't he amazing? He's just filled with so much knowledge. So to learn more about him and to learn about the documentary Betrayal, I'll have that all in the show notes. Head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 209. And also you got to pick up his book. You have to pick up his book. So I'll have the link to that as well in the show notes. Thank you all for listening. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned that how toxins just affect everything. And our brain, listen, we have to start taking care of our brain more, We don't want to be, starting, it sounds like it's starting earlier and earlier, 40 years old. And I did put a post about this study. And I don't know if people just didn't like it. People don't want to hear about the fact that you can do something about it right now to avoid what happens 30 years from now, 40 years from now. So let's all be proactive, take care of our brains a little more, pick up his book, and That's it. I'll talk to you guys all next week, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are happy, you are healthy, and we'll talk to you then. Bye for now.